smells
Hey,
terrible.
I just completed my 1,000th anime. I can't believe it.
I gotta throw these out. They smell really bad. They smell like
it smells like
fireworks.
gunpowder.
What
Just
the
throw
fuck?
them. Just toss them. Just
Wait,
toss
they
them
have
across the
actual
room.
powder in them.
Oh no. Well, just one of yours. Nah, that's not powder. It's just a.
No, it's some kind of powder. I'm throwing them away.
This is the Anime Classics Night video cast, I guess, where I, Digibro, am joined by my new part-time editor for Manga Mondays.
Oh god, where am I? Am I on the main channel?
Pantsu Party.
This is wrong.
Well, you know.
Oh boy.
The After Dark channel's
embracing for angry
on the
comments.
main channel, so this is what's happening. This is just going to be a very casual, chilled out review / hangout podcast
Discussion.
thing. You know, if you're looking for like an intense fucking analytical video, you should not watch this.
Well, we don't know. It could turn into a debate.
It could turn into a heated debate about these movies.
I
We
know
don't
we
know.
have kind of different opinions about
Yes,
them.
about the two films that we've watched for this.
We've already gotten into one heated debate. So,
yes.
no
So
promises.
we'll see what happens. But this is meant to just be casual viewing. Opt in whenever you feel like. Dip in and out. I love this kind of content. You know, stuff like Half in the Bag or even like Weagawa from Nate, where you just kind of throw it on while you're eating. And then you turn it off when you're done eating. Because you go, oh, I don't need to sit here and watch YouTube all fucking day. But if you do need to sit here and watch YouTube all day, stick around. We're gonna open some gifts that we'll call them celebration gifts for my 1,000th completed anime, even though they were not sent with that intention.
No.
But yeah, so ever since I finished 700 completed anime, for anybody who doesn't know, we're talking about the stats on Mal. On my anime list.
How long ago was it that you finished 700?
It was a couple years ago. I remember when I reached 1,000 total entries on Mal, I did a post about it on my blog, like, way back. And the 1,000th thing I watched was One Piece Strong World. It's one of the One Piece movies. And I wrote a little post about it. But when I was hit 700 completed, somebody had noted it to me. Someone was like, hey, you're about to hit 700 completed.
As if 700 is a meaningful number.
Well, just,
700 club?
any 100 is...
700 club.
I guess so. It
You
is.
haven't finished 700 anime? Fuck you.
Yeah.
Oops. Oh, shit.
Well, I decided that for each 100th anime I reached,
Immediately demonetized.
I would watch a classic anime film that I haven't seen yet. So for the 700th, I watched Tokyo Godfathers, which was amazing. For the 800th, I watched, I think, Hakujaden, which was not good, but it is, important.
Remember when you watched that?
900 might have been... Was that when we watched Paprika? Was that for my 900th, or was that something else? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
But for this one, for 1,000, we had 2 left. There were 2 anime before I would hit 1,000 completed. So I decided to double up on classic films I hadn't seen yet. So we watched Night on the Galactic Railroad and Belladonna of Sadness. And we're going to be telling you about each of them starting now. And then that's where I cut to a trailer of... Night on the Galactic Railroad is based on a really old Japanese children's book.
From the 1920s.
Yes. That is apparently very common in Japan. Like, most kids have read it at some point in school. It's sort of... People compare it to The Little Prince from France. It's, sort of an existentialist work that is palatable to children, I guess. I mean, it's kind of dark. It has kind of a sad ending.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. But
It's not really something that we would think of as, like, mandatory child reading in the States.
Probably not. I mean, maybe for, like, older kids, like, maybe 8 to 12, more so than, like, children, but, like, because I definitely think it's meant to help you cope with loss on some level, but it does this through some really, like, high-minded concepts of, like, dealing with loss. I mean, going by the movie, I don't think the movie could qualify as children's in any way. What do you think? Like, what would you have reacted to this movie if you saw it as a kid?
It definitely was very dark, especially towards the end.
Even just color-wise. The movie is literally darkly colored.
Yeah.
It's like
but
foreboding.
It does have like very friendly kind of like character designs that, you know, I could see like somebody maybe 7 or 8 and up this appealing to, but like not for young children, like not for 4 or 5-year-olds. It'd be terrifying.
This movie would have terrified me even if I was like 12 or 13, or at least it would have bored me to tears because it is slow as hell. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's pretty sparse. There's just long scenes
lots
of
silence. Fluoride stairs.
Yeah. And the character designs are, I don't really find them cute. I don't find them appealing at all.
They're grotesque, for a better sense of a word. They are gay furry designs.
They are, yeah, it's like, they're, okay, so everyone in this movie is an anthropomorphized cat, if you couldn't tell from the trailer
footage. Everyone in this movie is Donald Ducking it.
And, yeah, they're all Donald Ducking it. And, the original novel, I think, is human characters, and...
I don't know if that's true, because there are human characters in the film, so, like, obviously there is a reason to have a distinction between
Well, based on my research, it was human
people.
characters. They were not cats in the book.
Why do you think they made the decision to make them cats?
Apparently, because I was reading the Buried Treasure article that Justin Savakis wrote about this movie, and the producer who brought this movie to life had produced all of the films that were adaptations of this guy's work. He adapted all of the novels by this guy into anime. One of them being Gouch the Cellist, which was directed by Isao Takahata. So, you know, there's a few of them. But this one was apparently the hardest one to get off the ground. They had made a bunch of attempts and hadn't been able to do it. And ultimately, they decided that the only way that they could capture the tone correctly was to use animal characters. So that was just the only way they were able to get the project off the ground.
That makes me wonder if they decided to include a set of human characters is so they can have, like, a waifu. So they can have, like, you know, a cute girl in the film
you
at
think
all.
So?
Why else would they be people?
I think it was just because of the realization that it was the Titanic that you felt more of a... Because, okay, so in this movie, it's mostly a bunch of sort of surreal imagery. It takes place in a town where everything is named like Italian names and stuff, so it seems like an Italian town.
All the characters have Italian names. All of the writing is in Italian, so like you're gonna make the assumption that like they're in Italy, and I think that's probably because it's about stars, and you know Galileo is Italian. Good point. So I think they just kind of went with that theming.
Yeah, I mean, the original book also has everything named in Italian, and apparently it's partly because of just the fact that Western culture was permeating Japan at that time. Like, you know, Italian stuff was cool. Same reason Miyazaki, you know, is so influenced by that kind of stuff. But, like, yeah, the even though it's all Italian seeming, it's not literally Italy. They're not in Rome or anything. Like, they don't name the town.
They're in a made-up town.
Right.
That weirdly has, like, some kind of pagan ritual with the stars.
Yes, that's right.
The people are all obsessed with the stars there.
So, like, the thrust of the movie, I mean, like, the first 30 minutes or so is just introducing us to the main character and his town and his life and just, like, slowly getting you into what he's about. And then he basically gets whisked away by a magical space train, and then it becomes a space adventure movie on a train. The original book was, you know, what influenced Galaxy Express 3.9. You can definitely see stylistic similarities to that. I mean, it's literally a train going through the galaxy, stopping at planets, and weird, surreal shit happens there. But, like, there's one point where they take on some passengers who were dying on the Titanic, and they are humanoid, even though everyone else in the movie is a cat. No matter what planet they go to, what they show. But there's
a little girl.
There is a little girl and a little boy and a guy who's like a
he's a tutor.
Yeah, he's a tutor, but he kind of looks like a friar or whatever, like a religious pilgrim.
He just looks very androgynous.
Yeah, well, these three characters, I think it was just because it was the Titanic, it would have been weird if they had been cat people, and it kind of gives you this strange sense of
people, though. It's really
I don't
interesting
know.
that they
it's an odd choice for sure.
I feel like the book probably also included the Titanic because it was extremely relevant at the time. Like the Titanic was a huge tragedy, and it kind of maybe the book was written in part in response to
I hadn't even thought about that, like the fact that the Titanic would have just happened at the time, because the book, I mean, there's a few ways in which it's like kind of timely. Like it definitely, I mean, even just the fact that it's about a train and that train iconography is so important to it. Like, you know, I don't think a book like this would have come from any other time in history than when it did.
Certainly not the way it was, but I mean, like, in Western fiction, at least, there are still things that have to do with trains, like the Polar Express. This kind of reminded me of that, which is a book that came out in the 80s and has had a movie adaptation.
Yes. I mean, train iconography is cool and will probably stand the test of time, but like...
I think that's why they included a train, though, is because it's kind of timeless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't... I mean, at the time, it was new. They were
but I
mean,
like,
trains.
in modern days, it's kind of like, it evokes nostalgia by having trains.
Certainly. So, getting into this movie, I guess the first thing I'll ask you is, what did you think of it?
I thought this movie was very interesting. I think it had a lot of really cool animation sequences that I wasn't expecting to happen. Mm-hmm. There was one scene where they're like doing the festival, and it has like all of the cats like going in a circle. Yeah. And I thought that was like really cool, just use of perspective, and it was really interesting. It had like a lot of really great music. I love the backgrounds.
The music is great. Particularly the festival tune.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I gotta rap over this. So here's my rap over this. Another wind blows, another star goes across the night skies, a part of us dies. Another wind blows, another star goes. And we're back. So
Jesus Christ, did you?
So there's a lot of, aside from that song, which is probably the most like down-tempo song in the movie, most of it's like insanely bombastic, which is like, it's a stark contrast because most of the movie is quiet. There's usually no music at all. It's just characters having very slow, ponderous conversations.
Just
staring into space.
Let's be honest.
And then like when the music kicks in, it's just like just blowing your fucking hat off your head, like massive sounds. Orchestral swells. I dug the music a lot. I mean, most of my favorite scenes in this movie were the scenes that had music. Yeah. That was usually when it was like, oh, I'm awake and paying full attention. As you said, though, there's a lot of characters just staring. And, like, it was weird because I have to assume that the original book has inner monologue.
Because it can't just have nothing.
Right. Well, because these scenes, what was so weird about them is that there'd be moments where a character is just kind of staring into the camera, and it feels like if this was any other anime, there would be narration happening there. But there's not. It's like they left the space for the narration, but then cut the narration. And I'd really be curious to know if there was actually a version of this movie that did have narration. That would be fascinating because there's so much of characters just staring at each other. And, like, I guess you can kind of project your own idea of what they might be thinking. You can kind of imagine based on their personalities or the situation. Because they're kids, they're probably not having complex thoughts.
When the characters are staring off, like, I think it's very easy to kind of draw your own conclusions about what that character might be feeling, what they might be like, what their thoughts would be. Because it's usually in response to the environment they're in, whether it be a trippy like flight, like not flight but like space interstellar kind of thing, or just like facing the realities of how mundane the world is. Like, I don't know, because the main character is the one who's usually staring off.
Yes, which is why I think it's probably narration, because it would make sense that he would be thinking about stuff. I guess, like, It bothered me at first because I didn't feel like I had connected with him enough to get his deal. Like, by a certain point in the movie, I kind of understood that he was just, like, an average kid. That, like, because it's not really until the scene where he comes home to his mom and he's talking to his mom that I started to get a sense of, like, okay, he's pretty much a normal child. And then when he gets on the train and he sees that Campanella's there, and he's like all excited to hang out with Campanella. Like, it made me think, okay, he's basically just a child. So I should just probably imagine he's thinking what a child would be thinking. Which, I mean, I don't know if that's how you're really meant to even take it. Like, maybe you're meant to think about just what does it make you feel? What would you be thinking? Like, maybe that's why they left those gaps there.
I think that is likely.
For me, though, I just found myself constantly trying to read what I thought this character was thinking. Like, what is his reaction? What is he thinking as he stares into space? And it kind of made me feel like I might have gotten more out of it had there been narration, because there'd be more for me to read into as opposed to trying to bring my own thing to the movie. Because, like, there is clearly a meaning to the film. It definitely has a theme that is communicated well enough that anybody could get it. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that aren't so clear, that don't necessarily obviously feed into the central theme, that are more open to interpretation and for your projection.
Yeah.
I'm just not that prone to projecting onto it. I don't feel myself like the imagery didn't strike enough of a chord with me for me to start projecting myself onto it in a way that I did with the other movie we're going to talk about, where it was very easy for me to like come up with connections and feel something about myself reflected in it. This movie was, maybe just because it's not my style or aesthetic, maybe just because I don't care for the character designs, I don't know, but
yeah.
I didn't find myself projecting that much onto the movie. It was more like I kept asking the movie to give me more information about the characters that I wasn't getting. But how did you feel about that?
Well, okay, so I have kind of a different take on this. The movie opens up with like a shot of the school, and then it pans into a clock. Mm-hmm. So one theme that is reoccurring throughout the movie is like how time passes, what time it is, just time in general. And you kind of get the sense that like the character, he's staring off into space. Sometimes when he's staring off into space, like you can see these weird black molecules, like he's literally staring off into space. So when you think about like him, he's going to his job after school, and it's very monotonous, and you just hear this very steady sound of like the printing press of where he works. Yeah. And as the movie goes on, there's always like, dripping milk from the faucet, or a metronome that is literally keeping time. So it's like, it's very steady. Like when he's in reality, time is moving at this very steady rate. And you see like how much time he's wasting. Mm-hmm. And like you see that the character is like staring off into space because he's human.
He makes mention of how long things will take. Like when he leaves the house, he tells his mom like it'll probably take an hour, maybe an hour and a half, like just to go get milk.
Yeah, and then the characters that he runs into will usually say something that has to do with time. Like there might be a guy who drops his train ticket, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be late for my train. I need this." Or like he'll meet like the old lady at the milk place, and she will tell him, "Oh, are you late for your train?" So it's like a consistent thing that is being brought up. And like as he goes into different worlds, we notice that like time is happening at an accelerated rate or a different rate. And it's like, it just, what is a second? What can be done in a second? Like how quick your life can change is, I think, a big theme of the story.
That's an interesting, now that you mention it, that's a big part of it.
Because it all happens kind of within a day.
Right. And sort of the funny thing about it is that everything leading up to when he boards the train is incredibly mundane. And then when he gets off, it's instantaneously something very dramatic happens. And so it is kind of like your whole life changed in a second, but like the train experience being a metaphor for that way that it was going to change.
Yeah, and trains, typically in Japan, especially run on a very strict schedule.
Yes, they're very on time.
And like
I don't know how true that was in the 20s, but it's definitely true now.
The train's wheel was a clock.
The clock imagery was out of control.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't noticed because I'm not attentive enough of a viewer. You caught on pretty quickly to the clock thing, and when you pointed it out, it was like, oh, now I can't stop seeing it. It opens with
the scene of a clock before we go into the classroom. You can see that it's almost, I think, 4:30 at the time. And it's like, okay, school's probably going to get out soon. Right. Lo and behold, school gets out.
Yeah, you literally called that the bell was going to ring because you had seen it on the clock, which I would never have thought about at all.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting that there's like a significance to everything in the story, pretty much.
Right.
And that it all kind of like ties into a theme, and you can kind of extrapolate your own meanings from it. But I do think that was like an interesting thing about it, and it kept me engaged in the movie even when there was not much going on.
Yeah. I think what interested me the most about the commentary on time was the idea of viewing it from different perspectives, because it's sort of hinted at one point that this train travels fourth dimensionally. And it is going beyond the concept of time, and therefore you perceive time differently depending on what angle you're viewing it from, which is true. Time is relative. It is, it's the whole fucking, Einstein's theory of relativity, right? Which
also would have been relevant at the time.
Exactly. It probably would have been pretty new. So, the idea that time is relative, basically, what might be a minute for you could be hundreds of years for somebody else. It depends on distance and all kinds of different. I can't really explain it that well because I don't know the science behind it.
I mean, I don't think this movie does either, because
it doesn't really commentate on the science itself, but like
it's just like an interesting thing that
there's a scene where the characters go into this underground, like they leave the train at this one stop, they go down a flight of stairs, and they end up in this town. They're in like a town square. They go even deeper and they end up in like the Nazca under the forest area, Ash Lake from Dark Souls, and they find these big ass walnuts, and they're talking to what appears to be their teacher or something. It could just be another cat who looks a lot like him. It was hard to tell.
Who knows?
But he's basically telling them about how time looks different from different perspectives. And, they go back up and the village is completely weathered. Like, the village has clearly been destroyed by time.
Yeah.
And the walnut, like, dissolves in his hand as, like, 1.2 million years pass in an instant for this walnut. But he perceives it as a second. And, like, it's pretty cool, dude. It's pretty cool fucking existentialist thought shit, dude. Rick and Morty, man. Which is like more like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of the themes in this movie are cool shit that I am down for, but like, it's just every story I've seen told a billion times. So like, ultimately, which ones I'm going to favor comes down to what resonates with me aesthetically. And like,
definitely,
there is aesthetic things about this movie that did resonate with me, namely the background art, which I thought was really cool. It's got this, I don't know what the name of the style is. It's definitely one of the classical art styles. I always call everything impressionistic because I don't know what I'm talking about, and it's definitely not that. But it's the background art is all like paintings, and there's a very unique aesthetic to them. I love the color work. I love the way that like trees are drawn and houses are drawn. It's like everything's clearly based on real life but doesn't quite look like real life. Mm-hmm. It's slightly surreal. Maybe this is what surrealist art is. But whatever the case, it's weird sometimes because when it's not showing characters running through the background, it does just look like a painting. Like, you almost get a disconnect, and it makes me understand why like this style of background isn't used more, because it doesn't feel like animation would be happening there. And like, occasionally when the characters are moving through the background, even, it still looks like almost superimposed onto the background. But usually when the characters are moving through it, it looks more natural. There's just a few moments where you're looking at it, you're like, oh, that's a nice painting. This does not feel like part of the movie, but I do really like that art style, and when the movie does its big visual moments, they fucking pop. Like, this, not every single shot is like a perfectly crafted one, but there's lots of shots that are just well done, even if they didn't have to be. Like, mundane shots of characters talking are sometimes just framed really cool, but when there's, big pop moments, like the main character climbing to the top of a hill to lay down in a field of flowers and look up at the stars, and just the color work of all of it is really gorgeous. I would love to play a video game with this color palette, you know? That's generally whenever I see like a really great looking world in an animation, it makes me want to play a video game set in that world.
Yeah, because you just want to explore the environment.
Yeah, and just be in there with those colors and with that setting. And this film gave me some of that feeling, which is
definitely was vibing with the color choice and just the aesthetic of the world.
I
really liked the architecture of the town too. Like the town itself had its own personality. It was very rustic. Had a lot of like just symbols that like, you know, you could tell that the people worshipped the moon and the stars and stuff. Like just the architecture of the place was pretty cool.
I guess what bothered me about the character designs is that they're not very expressive. Like, it's basically a bunch of stoic-faced cats.
Yeah, and it's kind of, you know, when you have a character who just stares off for minutes of the movie, you know, maybe you wish there'd be a little bit more there.
He feels like Holden Caulfield as a cat in a way. That's how I imagine he would be portrayed in an anime movie. But like, yeah, it's just that the cats are always just kind of staring off, and I mean, the whole movie definitely has like a thick atmosphere. It's got this almost oppressive tone. I mean, even though the movie's called Night on the Galactic Railroad, when the train actually showed up, I was legitimately surprised because it had been 30 minutes of like slow moving, you know, walking around a town, just like exploring this kid's everyday life. And then all of a sudden a giant space train shows up and I'm like, oh right, this is a space train movie.
Yeah.
There's also a big ass space Jesus. There's a big cross in space.
There is some Christian symbols and, you know, allusions to religion.
Which is really interesting because there were parts of the movie. So I had not, while we were watching this, known that this was based on a Japanese book. And so when all the Christian imagery showed up, I thought that probably the original novel was Christian on some level. When I found out that wasn't the case, it changed my perception of it a little bit because I guess we'll go ahead and get into spoiler talk now. I think you've pretty much heard our stance on the movie in general, so we'll go into a little bit deeper of themes and stuff like that, but and talking about things that happen later in the movie. Here's the time code to skip to if you just want to go to the Belladonna of Sadness review and you don't want to be spoiled for this movie before you watch it. Anyway, so there's a big Jesus in space, and there's this idea of the characters going...
it's just a cross.
Yeah. Well, there's this idea that the characters are like going to heaven. As the movie goes on, we gradually start to realize that this train is a train for dead people. That our main character is the only person who's alive on the train. I mean, at first we just learn that he's different from everybody else because he has a ticket from the third dimension, whereas everybody else has a ticket from the fourth dimension. So either he's dead or they're all dead.
And you do get told by like the other characters that interact with him, like, oh, there's something different about you. Right. So like they plant the seed.
Yeah, and then when it's finally revealed, it's like, okay, he's the one who's alive, and like you know it before, like you see it coming, but it's handled well. Like they want you to know it's coming so that there's some build up to the reveal that Campanella is going to just go into the void, you know. But like it's presented that there are certain characters who go to heaven, like the literal Jesus heaven. But then there's something else called true heaven, which is just a black hole at the end of the universe that your soul just passes into, I guess. So I don't know if Christian heaven is just a stop on the way to true heaven, or...
So what I'm thinking is that, like, maybe if you're already dead, you can ride the train anyways. Mm-hmm. And that, like, when you ride it, when you die, you go to, like, the end place to then decide if you are going to heaven or to hell. Because, like, it seemed like the other characters
I don't know if
knew
hell
what was
exists
going
in this
on.
movie, though.
No, there's no allusions to like, hell.
Because at first
like,
we thought that the end place was hell. Like,
because it's a black hole.
Right. It's like, well, and it's right after they show Christian heaven, they then show...
Yeah, and his friend is, like, crying, and it's like, what?
And it's
and
referred...
going to hell?
But it's referred to as true heaven, and there's not really any thought about the idea of hell, and like I had thought it was going to turn out that he had killed himself and that was why he was going to go to hell, because there's also themes in this movie about not killing yourself.
Yeah, and about like self-sacrifice,
right,
and stuff.
And like basically continuing to live so that you can serve other people, and that being a reason that it's basically the argument you should not kill yourself, because even if you're of no use to yourself, you can be of use to other people. Or if you're going to die in a way that is helpful to others, you know. There's this parable told about a scorpion who had killed lots of bugs and eaten them, but then he gets chased by, I think, an armadillo or something, and crawls into a well. A weasel. He crawls into a well, and he's regretting because he's thinking about how, like, you know, I've killed so many insects, but when it came for me, I ran off. And now I'm just going to die in this well that I'm trapped in instead of being food for someone. Then like, I could have perpetuated their life instead of just dying for no reason hopelessly in this well, you know? And so like the movie celebrates that sort of thought process of self-sacrifice.
Yeah, he tells God to make him useful in the next life, so God makes him a star. Ah,
yes. And that's the story of Scorpio,
yes.
Right? And so like Campanella, it turns out, did sacrifice himself. He saved the asshole bully character and himself drowned, and so it's sort of implied that, you know, through this journey, Giovanni, the main character, we never said his name, Giovanni realizes that, you know, his friend's sacrifice was worthwhile, essentially, that like, you know, he should not grieve and get hung up on the fact that his friend died. And he should think of the nobility.
He vows to be like the scorpion,
right,
and to live to, you know, to serve a purpose.
Right. So that, again, the Christian stuff is confusing, because I mean, this train seems to be full of dead souls, and I don't know if it's just that they're allowed to continue going to different places as long as they feel like, and just kind of go to the end place whenever they want. Like, it's really not clear. And apparently this novel, the original novel, in spite of being as famous and celebrated as it was unfinished, because the guy writing it died before he finished it, and he had not done like the midsection, so I guess the ending was complete, but not the middle. So I assume they just kind of, you know, I mean, because it's kind of an episodic story, it's not that hard to skip over the gaps. But I wonder if the meaning would have been more clear had there been that midsection, or like more explanation of what the train is, what the people on it are, aside from just dead people. Like,
if there is a hell on this train.
Because one of the people who they encounter is a guy who goes around collecting birds that become candy when he collects them, and it's kind of implied that he's been doing this for a long time. He travels around on this train collecting birds and giving them to people. Clearly he isn't, you know, he's been doing it for a while. So even if he is dead, he has not gone to heaven or true heaven. So is it just that Campanella was going straight there because he doesn't have anything else to do, or I don't know. That was kind of a vague element of the story.
Yeah.
So should we talk about some of the individual stops along the way?
Sure, but I also would like to address, in the beginning, you know, our main character Giovanni is being bullied.
Yes.
I just think that's like an interesting way to kind of round out the character and have you understand like what kind of sacrifices he's already making.
He's in a bad spot as a person. Like, I think that's, part of it is also that he's somebody who is deciding to be that kind of person in spite of the fact that he is not in his life's not great. His mom is sick and in bed. He gets bullied at school because everybody thinks his dad is off doing something illegal because he hasn't come home from a trip he was on.
Yeah.
And
all the kids make fun of him because he must have told them that his dad is going to bring him back a sealed coat.
Uh-huh.
So I wonder if like the kids in his class are like somewhat jealous and then are hoping that, you know, his dad won't come back.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because they're not in good situations either.
It's really unclear, but like they're just kind of like the rumor has gone around that his dad is doing something illegal, and so everybody's kind of bullying him about it. And except for Campanella, who stands up for him because they've been longtime friends.
His dad is friends with
his dad. Yeah.
His dad.
And it's kind of implied that Campanella's dad is like important. He's like, I don't know if he's like the mayor or whatever, but he's like an important figure in the town.
Yeah. He's a cool guy.
But
with the train that runs on alcohol.
But yeah, so Giovanni, he's in a kind of emotional state, and but at the end we find out that his dad had sent a letter just the other day, and he should be coming home soon. Because the rumor was that his dad was in jail, and that was why he hadn't come home yet. So but knowing that he's gonna be okay, it's like, yeah, things will go okay for Giovanni from now on, I guess. Yeah. So, is that all you wanted to say about the early part? Just that it's interesting that he gets bullied.
Yeah, and that Campanello dies saving the bully.
Yeah, which he could have easily taken differently.
Yes.
There is a scene. I think that the sort of low point that he reaches is when he's at the festival, and he shows up to have fun at this festival, and all the other kids like pass by him and make fun of him, and Campanella's there just having a good time, in the crowd, doesn't really come to comfort him or come to his rescue or anything. So he kind of just feels shut out, and that's when he runs up onto the mountain and gets taken by the train. But it turns out Campanella's on the train, so yay! But he's dead. Boo.
When he gets on the train, he says that the other kids were chasing after him but weren't fast enough. So it kind of like made me think that what if he like drowned himself and the other kids were trying to save him? So like I went through the movie like suspicious about how he got there.
Yeah,
and, wondering if maybe he like killed himself.
That was how I had felt too, but like, I mean, I had to go and read the plot synopsis online just to like confirm what what it was, just to be sure that like I had all the facts straight, because by the end of the movie I still felt like a lot of things were up in the air that would affect how I interpreted it.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately the interpretation I came away with was pretty straightforwardly that it's just a story about self-sacrifice, but some of the stops along the way have their own little messages.
Yes.
And the one that such as the time time from different perspectives part, but the one that had stuck with me the most was, so they're on the train and there's this creepy guy, this like big fat cat who is obviously meant to be kind of skeevy. Alex Jones, that's what he reminded you of. He's kind of like a skeevy cat who offers them birds. So he has a bag full of birds, and they just look like what was it, like doves or cranes or something that are...
were they herons? I don't remember.
Herons. They're herons that are just like frozen still, and he just like pulls off their legs, and they just pop off like, with no disturbance, and he hands it to the kids, and Giovanni eats some, and he's like, oh, this is candy. And then the guy's like, okay, I'm gonna go stop at this stop and catch some birds. So we see him go on to just like this weird yellow ball of a planet, and a bunch of birds fly down, and he just starts grabbing them and stuffing them in a bag. And like, I just thought it was such an interesting portrayal of the idea of like consuming other life, because you've got this guy who's clearly like he's purely capitalistically minded, right? Like he's just out to capture birds to sell them. That is his job. He's very proud of himself for the fact that he does it well.
Although he doesn't ask the kids for money or anything.
No, but he makes it clear that he does this for money. Like this, he says he has customers all over the place. He talks with this other guy about like the trade routes and stuff, and what kind of birds are around, what kind of prices they fetch. So for him, this is just purely business. There is no moral thought to any of it. And the movie doesn't propose moral thought. It just shows the scene of a skeevy-looking salesman grabbing gorgeous, beautiful birds out of mid-flight and stuffing them into a bag. And as they get stuffed in, they just transform into the food. And so it's like, it's simultaneously beautiful and disturbing, and it makes you feel weird, but he comes back and the birds are candy, it's delicious. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is what it's like. This is basically what we do, is take a thing, a gorgeous, beautiful bird, and turn it into consumable product because we feel like it and because it tastes good, I just thought it was interesting that they portrayed it so vividly without making any statements about it. You don't have Giovanni like saying like, oh, then I felt bad that I had eaten the bird, but he does kind of look disturbed. Like he definitely is thinking something about it, but this is the one place where I was very glad to be able to project my own thoughts onto it, to kind of say, like, let me decide how I feel about it, or what I think Giovanni's expression means. So, yeah, that was my favorite scene in the movie.
What about the other cat that was, like, friends with the one who was, like, the hunting one?
The guy who like turns into a bird at one point. It was just kind of like he was talking about this bird, and so he like became the bird for a second. It's just some trippy imagery. The movie has some pretty trippy imagery.
What if he's like a shapeshifter, like an interdimensional alien or something?
Could be. You think he's a fucking clockwork elf?
He might be.
Do you remember any other parts you want to comment on?
The one scene where the train became the Titanic was like crazy.
It was pretty awesome. It looked cool as shit.
Had a lot of really cool colors and cool animation.
It's a strange, like, there's definitely a lot of moments in this movie that are worth coming back to, that are like really gorgeous and really interesting. Like, I can't see myself easily rewatching this movie because I didn't get so much out of it for such a long, slow movie, But, like, ultimately I ended up giving it like a 6 out of 10 because even if it didn't reach me deeply, there was just enough in it that I felt was cool as hell. Like, enough really cool imagery, really great artwork, really interesting thoughts or themes going through it that it was like, I could see returning to this, I could see continuing to think about it. It just didn't have as much in it as I would have liked. It's not a movie I really see myself throwing on again, maybe in 5-10 years.
I mean, I don't think it's really a movie that is meant to be just thrown on.
No.
It's meant to be like a slow, contemplative movie that has some kind of like lesson in it.
Yeah.
I would probably give this movie like an 8. It made me really interested in possibly reading the novel it's based off of before returning to it again. I did get a lot out of it. It wasn't perfect. It definitely was very slow. I didn't really like the character designs that much.
I almost wondered if it was meant to be a companion piece to the novel, because it definitely doesn't seem like it was meant to be a replacement or like a perfect retelling. It seemed, just the fact that there was no narration and that so much of it is focused on atmosphere, it made me feel like maybe they kind of thought, okay, well, most people have probably read the original book, so like if you already know all the themes, all the stuff that's going on in the character's head, then this is just a more engrossing, more audio-visual version of the experience that, maybe heightens the emotions as opposed to merely telling the story. And so I do have to wonder if you've read the book, is the movie better? That would be interesting to ask.
Same thing.
Right. Well, I guess that's it for Night on the Galactic Railroad. So now let's watch some trailer footage from Belladonna of Sadness. Belladonna of Sadness is an art house experimental film from 1978 by Mushi Productions, the Osamu Tezuka studio, godfather of all manga. He produced this film, and it was one of the last movies that Mushi Pro made before they dissolved, and well, they're still around, but most of their people went to different studios and stuff. And Tezuka himself left the studio. It was part of a trilogy, I think it was the third in the trilogy, of just adult sexual erotic movies that they made. And while I guess you could call this an erotic movie, it definitely is not intended for sexual titillation. There's a lot of sex in it, a lot of nudity, but it is very disturbing and mostly more message driven than sexually driven. It is a sort of traditional martyr story, I guess I would say. Like, you don't really know where it's going at first. It's almost fairy tale-esque.
Yeah, it is presented as a fairy tale.
It's
especially
definitely
with like the art style.
Yeah, and it doesn't have like a traditional narrative structure of characters like scenes, characters, dialogue, like following them through. There's an element of that. Like, it still is a story, but it's told in a fairy tale storybook kind of way, where a lot of time is compressed into short moments where there might just be some narration that covers, like, here's what happened for the next few months, like, here's how we reached this next stage in the life of these characters, and the scenes, as it were, are more audio-visual spectacle.
Yes.
It's more about taking a certain moment and presenting it in a very heightened emotional way, rather than a scene that progresses the story, so to speak. It's intense. It is druggy, and I loved it. How did you feel about Belladonna of Sadness?
Well, I definitely thought it was mega interesting. I really liked how trippy it was, and the art style was really cool, and they did a lot of like neat things with it. As a movie, I thought it was too long to tell a story like that. There weren't really characters.
I would agree that the length of the movie is probably the biggest knock I would have against it, because it's not that original of a story. Like, it's a pretty standard, like, martyrdom narrative. Like, the beginning is almost Midori-esque, because it's basically watching a girl suffer for a while.
The movies are, like, when, like, if you read anything about Midori, it always, like, references, like,
Belladonna of Sadness.
Just because it kind of is the go-to Aroguro kind of anime film.
It was easy to see watching this how
they have a lot of similar themes, like a girl who has all these bad things happen to them, who kind of has power, and what that does to the character. And there's also like weird black magic, trippy sex scenes in both. But like the imagery in Midori has stayed in my mind forever, whereas the imagery in this movie, maybe it's because it's so 70s, so druggy. It just feels like stuff that I've seen before and is not going to be locked in my mind forever.
I could see that. I could see why you... Yeah. I mean, Midori has such a specific art style and aesthetic.
Yeah, and it's like unfortunate because, like, I don't want to compare the two movies, but, like, Midori is one of my favorite films. So when I see a movie that is trying to go for a similar feeling, and when just like I think the imagery in Midori is so much stronger, and the fact that it's by one guy versus like a team of people who had a lot more money. Not that
I think this was a very large team. No, they had very much money.
Definitely. I just like my preferenys are clear. I enjoy Midori more than this movie. I probably wouldn't return to it because of the length.
So the thing about this movie is I want to watch this on acid, because and you haven't really had an acid trip before.
No.
But this movie very clearly was made by people who had done acid.
Yeah.
And like
it was the 70s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was Japan, so it's not that like Japan never had like a massive drug culture the way that we do in America, but clearly there were drugs involved.
I mean, the movie is like very Western 70s like style in every way.
And it's hard to explain this in a way that people understand that they've never done drugs, because anytime anything is weird or trippy, people are going to say, "Oh, drugs." Like, "Oh, they must have been tripping up. Oh, how many drugs were they on?" But it's that the way acid makes you see things is that still images that have lots of detail move. If you see certain patterns, certain details and movements, then they will subtly shift. Everything's always kind of moving a little bit. And you'll have these moments where you stare at something and it kind of continually breaks down the longer you stare at it, and then you get your attention back and it shifts and it becomes something different. There's a lot of moments like that in this movie where you hold on a shot and it slowly sort of dissolves or shifts and changes, and then it flashes to something else. And there's also a lot of stills in this movie. A lot of it is not animated. A lot of it is just really beautiful, like, watercolor paintings that I think if you looked at them on acid with the way that they're drawn,
Oh, yeah.
would move a lot and would be really cool. However, I would not recommend that you watch this movie for the first time on acid because it's intense as fuck.
Yeah, it'd be really
and,
scary.
I think this movie would have fucking even on weed, I think this movie would have been terrifying.
Same.
Because it's very emotionally intense. Like, one of the first scenes in the movie is a rape scene that is like horrifying.
It's Devilman.
It's very there. I definitely think like Devilman, particularly Devilman Crybaby, feels like it drew a lot from this movie. This movie is cited as an influence on Revolutionary Girl Utena. I think that is obvious. Like, I can see the influence. I can see how maybe Ava took some from this. Like, it was surprising to me because like I've heard about this movie for a long time. I've seen images of it. I've seen stills. The movie is not what I was expecting. I knew it was going to be art house and trippy and crazy. I didn't know it was going to be such a like 70s drug movie. Like, all of the music is like psychedelic jazz fusion, jazz funk music.
Like, some of the music, like, I'm pretty sure I've heard like a jam session just like this before.
It sounded like
this sounds like Fish.
It sounded like some stuff that Omar Rodriguez Lopez would do, you know, on one of his weird solo albums. I loved the music. That was a big part of why I liked the movie so much, is that like it's my type of music, just like experimental funk jazz music. That just kind of jams out over the movie. It gave me a lot of Jesus Christ Superstar vibes because it was made around the same time. It's another like 70s drug culture take on a like martyr story, like a tale as old as time, but like told in the 70s. And it's especially interesting that this movie is set in like the Dark Ages. Like, the Black Plague happens in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's like clearly medieval, and yet everybody looks and dresses like they're in the 70s. Which
it's
again,
really interesting how it's like, it is like bubonic plague era, and then
Yeah.
it goes into the French Revolution. And it's like, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be in France because the characters are named like Jean and Genet.
Yeah.
So it's like, is this supposed to be about the French Revolution, and then characters get the bubonic plague, and it's like, well, this is way before then, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, the French Revolution's only mentioned at the very end, and it feels like a non sequitur almost. I don't even want to comment on that section because maybe if I knew history better, I'd know why.
I don't know, man.
It was very weird.
I just felt like it was like, oh, well, feminism and that shit, like, the French Revolution had women. That, like, we're in the 70s, man. It's all about
it literally,
dog.
the whole movie is, like, kind of like a female empowerment fairy tale, and then at the very end, it's like, and then the women were on the front lines. This is what caused that. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, it's like,
that was weird.
It skips, like, a couple hundred years, dog.
I'm not sure what the connection there was. That was the weirdest part of the movie. The very ending bit, I was just like, I'm not sure what they were going for there, other than, women.
I think, like, a lot of the stylistic choices were just like, oh, what if we did the 70s in, like, a medieval kind of Dark Ages thing, and it felt really wrong.
Well, again, that's what makes me think about perverse. Jesus Christ Superstar, because that movie is a bunch of 70s dressed hippies in the desert. Like, they're literally in, like, the place where Jesus was, but they come out of a bus dressed in fucking hippie clothes. So I definitely think that movie was an influence on this one, especially because some of the music is very similar. There's also like an opera element to it. There's not operatic for the whole movie, but there are a bunch of scenes where there's like a singing voice describing the plot.
Yes, that's how it opened, and I was like, "Is this gonna be? Please don't tell me this is gonna be an opera."
It opens with an amazing Enka song, and it's funny because even though Enka, obviously
it's just drawing so many like different influences from so many different things. It's just kind of a clusterfuck, and doesn't really like.
I like that about it.
Yeah, but like, this is not how people would be in the Dark Ages at all.
No,
why even bother setting it in the Dark Ages?
Just for the symbolism, because I mean, again, it's such a fairy tale. It's like the movie is very much like a parable. Like, nothing is very literal.
Yes.
It's all like symbolism, and the symbolism is pretty chaotic. Like, I think there's one clear message that it's going for, but that in displaying that message, it just pulls symbols from all over the place.
Yeah, or
that relate
I just
to
feel
those
like
themes.
that particular message didn't need to be explained for an hour and a half.
Maybe not. I mean, this is why I see a lot of the Utena influence here, where like I refer to Utena as prismatic storytelling, that it's like taking a bunch of random stuff that helps the central theme and just putting it all in there, and this movie's like that too. But the difference, of course, is that Utena has engrossing characters and a narrative that's interesting, and this movie, I mean, I was surprised that the story got even as interesting as it did, because at the very beginning, it really did feel more like a grotesqueries gallery, just like showing the bad way that things are. When the character actually starts to develop agency and start to, make her moves, I got engrossed in her story. But yeah, it's pretty simplistic. It probably didn't need to be an hour and a half. But hey, it just means more cool, trippy shit happens. So, like, I mean, I just loved all the animation in this movie. I thought it looked amazing all the time, and I was excited to look at it.
But, like, sometimes it was just, I didn't think the symbolism or imagery was, like, that interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
there are definitely certain scenes that are better than others. Yeah. I mean, there's parts where it's maybe a little repetitive or just not showing you something that interesting. But, like, parts like where the Black Plague hits and the whole fucking world melts into an ocean.
Cool.
It's one of the coolest animations I have ever seen.
There was a lot of cool bits in this.
The part where she, like, turns into, like, a vagina that's, like the weird
You mean the whole
red...
movie?
Fair enough. The giant orgy where the, like... Some of the best parts, and I wish this had happened earlier in the movie, is when it gets really goofy and, like, kind of slapstick and irreverent. Like, most of the early part of the movie is just dark and dramatic, and it's more like, almost heavy-handed. As it goes along, it gets more playful, it gets more, like, ridiculous.
There's one particular sex scene where, like, the climax is a bunch of weird things throughout history, just like
basically
cartooning.
all of pop culture.
It was fucking insane.
I think it was basically all the pop culture that had come after that point in time in history.
Yeah.
Like, sort of implying that this was the spawning point of all of culture, which makes sense thematically.
But it also had, like, the Egyptians and shit, so I don't think it was all...
Oh, did it? Well...
in the future.
Maybe,
I think it's more like,
maybe it was the pop media interpretation of the Egyptians. I don't even know. Maybe it just was all of pop culture.
I think it's like sometimes when you have sex, you can see all of time and history.
I've felt that before.
It's a real feeling. Look it up.
But there's this orgy scene where, like, characters are, like, their dicks are turning into horse heads, and, like, it literally was like the orgy scene from Devilman Crybaby. Like, that level of just, like, people transforming into weird monsters and hedonistic, insane shit.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of like, I like Devilman Crybaby. I love that scene.
Yeah.
Like, watching that after I've seen that, like, I can tell where the influence is, but, like, I still like the Devilman Crybaby scene more.
Well, the Devilman Crybaby scene
it's fucking crazy.
It's funny because this movie is celebratory in this scene, whereas Devilman is like a in between. There's a celebratory nature to it, but it's from the perspective of being horrifying.
Yeah, like, in this movie, it's, like, presented as devil shit, but it's really kind of like, free your mind, bro.
Well, that's the thing. This is the most Satanist movie I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, this movie is pro-Satan, and that's why I liked it so much. Because the movie is... So, I guess we'll get into spoiler talk. I mean, you get the point. This is a fucking weird art house movie. Whether or not you will enjoy it should be clear to you by this point. So
you should just watch it anyways.
Yeah,
because it has tons of influence on, like, all kinds.
If you're the kind of person who watches things because they're important, you should watch this. There's a lot of people who don't give a shit.
I just think that no matter who you are, you're going to see something that you haven't seen before.
You'll definitely see some weird shit. I mean, like, you'll see a lot of stuff you have seen before if you've seen a lot of media, but you will also see some weird, interesting, unique shit in this movie. Particularly the Black Plague scene. That's worth the price of admission alone. Yeah. Or you can just look it up on Sakugaboru. Like, that's
better yet, just go to the Sakugaboru of this movie. Yeah, don't bother watching it.
You don't necessarily need to watch it.
But
you can just
put
look
the
at some
soundtrack
cool
on in the background.
Yeah.
There you go. Optimal viewing. And make sure you're on fucking tons of drugs.
Yeah, here's a time code for if you just want to skip to the mailbag section, but we're going to get into spoilers now. So, the main thrust of what I consider this movie to be about is about self-empowerment even when it's at the cost of, like, going against society. Because the movie basically begins with the two main characters, Jean and Janae, I guess is how you're supposed to say them.
Jean and Jean.
Yeah, Jean and Jean.
Say in Japanese.
Well, they say her name is like Jean. So Jean and Jean. But I don't know how you're meant to pronounce them. As far as I read them, they're Jean and John. But it's, you know, the male and female versions of the same name. And they've just gotten married, and they're both just pure, hardworking, good-natured, beautiful people.
They're just beautiful,
they're happy
people.
They're in love. They're peasants, and I guess they have to have their marriage recognized by the king. You have to pay like a marriage tax, and
That's
king.
what fucking stands for. Fornication under king's consent.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense because that's the consent of the king. You mean?
Yeah.
Okay, that's still fucking bizarre. Anyway, so yeah, the king's like, oh, you gotta fucking pay me 10 cows for this marriage, and they're like, but we can only afford one, and he's like, well, then I'm gonna rape that bitch. So he rapes her and has everybody else in his stable rape her just because he can, and he's an asshole.
Do you think that's what happened? Everybody raped her?
He said, after I'm done, you can all have a turn.
Okay, because they just looked like demons crawling on top of her.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. And
So,
she gets split open by a dick.
Oh, yeah. That's the most Devilman shit in the whole thing. Is like, literally, it shows her body getting torn in half when he goes inside.
It was horrifying.
Yeah, it's a really shocking and terrifying way to open a movie, for sure.
After it starts with like this beautiful like storybook. Oh,
yeah,
like they're getting
happy,
married,
they're
they
in
love
love.
each other.
Well, that didn't last, you know. And of course, he like kind of his downward spiral is pretty much cemented right from that. Like as soon as she gets raped, he like tries to say like, oh well, we'll just put it past us, but he immediately chokes her out. And then cries himself to sleep. So it's like, okay, well, he's a write-off. The rest of the movie is just him on a downward spiral. You don't have to pay attention to him. He's not important. He's just an asshole. But Janae, she basically, you know, from this position of like, well, I had lived my life piously, correctly. I did everything right, and I got hideously raped. You know, like, my life with my husband's not, like, nothing's changing about their relationship. So she starts to hear a voice in her head, and the voice just claims to be herself. She considers it to be the devil. She's like, you are Satan, you're trying to corrupt me. And the voice is just like, no, I'm just you. She
sees him, and he is a little penis man.
I think that's just the psychological trauma, you know? I think that
He's a little penis man.
I think her mind has basically fractured from the trauma of the being raped by everybody, and that there's sort of a split personality. This is my interpretation.
But what's split personality? She is just this afterwards.
Well, I mean to say that there's her and then there's devil. Like, the devil is another voice in her head, basically. That she considers to be the devil, and it personifies itself as just a penis. Like, it's just a weird little cock.
Well, I think this movie is fucking weird, and a lot of crazy weird shit happens, so I fully believe that is the devil.
It could be. It could be that the intention is that it is the devil. I took it to be, like, because of the fact that it keeps insisting, I am you. Like, I'm just you. I am just the ability you have to seize power and to, you know, to take things into your own hands. And the movie is about her very slowly embracing it, because she doesn't want to embrace it, because she sees it as devil shit. She sees it as, you're the devil.
So,
if I give my soul to you, then I'll go to hell. I won't be, you know, I'll be punished in some way. Like, she believes that seizing power will get her punished, which is what normal people think.
So I would buy into this way of looking at it if you had any kind of explanation on the commentary of masturbation. Because if she's not fucking the devil, she's masturbating.
Well,
which would make sense.
Yes,
like,
that's
to
what
draw power.
That's what I assume is happening. Because, like, throughout the whole movie, sexual liberation is pretty much at the forefront.
Yes.
And that's what I would say is the most unique thing about this movie, like, what makes it worth existing. Because, like, again, the story is pretty generic and standard, and because the characters and narrative aren't that interesting on their own, the main thing that is interesting about it is that it fixates so much on sexuality as the method of control of the sort of, I guess we'll call it the patriarchy, you know, the king, the evil man who is holding down the woman. He's using sex to control people, because you cannot, like, the reason he, like, when he rapes her, he says, like, is she a pure maiden? And the guy's kind of, I don't know, they're kind of shaky. It's unclear if he had sex with her or not.
She definitely bleeds after all the sex.
That's true. So
I don't know if it's just because she got torn in half.
Right. I don't know how, if it was that, but, like,
I'm gonna take it as she was.
They control people sexually. You're not allowed to fuck without the consent of the king, you know? And, so to masturbate is to go against the will of the king and the will of God, you know, because God and the king are synonymous in these societies. The king is appointed by God. He is the will of God. If you go against that, that is heresy. So she is committing heresy by beginning to, you know, feel sexual pleasure from herself. Or fucking the devil, whatever the case may be. The fact that she's enjoying sex is going against the light of God. And she doesn't want to fully embrace it, but as she does embrace it, she is able to draw power from it. And at first she does this through basically just promiscuity. Like, it's kind of implied that, I don't know if she's fucking people or if she's just seducing people, but she starts making money by way of just being confident in herself and just kind of deciding to have the power to do it. Like, just deciding, this is what I do now, I make money. And she becomes successful, but every time she becomes a little bit more successful, and her husband in turn, they get punished for it. Where the king goes, oh, you're trying to have success instead of me? Fuck you. And he just, you know, takes her down a peg. So every time, though, she gets more powerful, because every time they don't kill her, she gets a little bit more devil, a little bit more, fuck you guys. And I guess this is why the movie is longer than it needs to be, because it is repetitive. Like, we didn't need to see her every single time. It's the same thing happening. She gets a little stronger, they penalize her.
Yeah.
And it's not, she doesn't get stronger in interesting ways. It's not even really explained how. Like, it's just like, oh, she got more resentful, and therefore she is just more powerful.
Which inclines me to believe that, like, it's supposed to be a devil. Don't read too much into it. And also the fact that, like, she is doing this all for her husband's sake. That's what she says. She's, like, doing it for him. Meanwhile, he's beating her.
Well, that's the thing, is that when she finally is able to fully embrace the devil, it's in spite of him. It's when she's doing it for herself. Because, like, she's basically using him as an excuse. It's like she can justify her actions as still being something because, like, oh, I haven't strayed from the light of God. I'm just trying to help my husband, you know? But her husband's fucking useless. He's just a fuckboy who is doing whatever, you know, like, whatever will advance him through society normally. He doesn't really think outside the box or appreciate
a tax collector.
Right.
The lowest of the low.
So eventually it gets to a point
his hand cut off,
where she gets driven out of the kingdom, where they leave her in the wilderness to die, I guess.
It was
kind of
very
unclear.
Confused because they said they were going to lock her in a dungeon, and then she has escaped.
I don't know if she ran away or if they threw her away. It was really unclear and confusing. But she ends up in the wilderness, and basically she thinks she's just going to die out there. But when she sees beautiful nature living outside the kingdom, that, like, you know, inside the kingdom everyone's fucking dying, the Black Plague is happening, everybody's poor, everything sucks, but when she goes out on her own and lives among nature, she's like, oh, there's, you know, there's medicinal plants out here I can use to fucking help myself.
Smoking the herb.
I could smoke the herb and open my mind and be fucking liberated. It's like the most blatant paganism ever in a movie.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen such a heavy-handed approach to a paganist message in a film such as this. But yeah, it's literally some pagan libertarian shit. She goes out and lives on the land. And then she starts sort of luring people out because she you know, fully embraces the devil and just says, you know what, I want to do something bad. Like, I just want to fuck up society. Like, I've reached that point, you know, if I'm not going to die here.
Meanwhile, she's saving people by giving them medicine. Like, what is so bad about that?
Well, because it's overthrowing God's light. She's going against the will of the king and of God. So, you know, it's bad in the eyes of the morality of the age, but it's, you know, she's a...
But is she doing it to be bad, or is she doing it to help the people?
She's doing it to get back at the power structure.
Yeah.
You know, just to take control, just to be the new, you know, she's the new queen bitch. She's taking all the power away from the king. She's turning his people against him. And just by opening people up to both like the powers of the plants that are out there, realizing that the society is not the best way to live, that, living out here in the woods and giving into their sexual desires is making them all happier. And so, because she's bringing happiness to the people, they're starting to turn against the king. And she's in a position where she could probably overthrow the king or do something or just take her people and leave. But then her bullshit husband comes out with a message from the king. The king, he's like, oh, the king wants to strike a deal with you. He's willing to let you.
You forgot about how she seduced the page of the queen.
Oh yeah, she
didn't seduce him, but like
she helps him to fuck the queen.
He comes to her and says that like I'm in love with the queen. I want to fuck her. Yeah. So she gives him some kind of trippy potion.
Kind of aphrodisiac that he slips to the queen, and it makes her so horny she can't fucking stand it. So she fucks the page, and then the king murders them both.
The king stabs them both with a sword.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool scene.
And he's like, oh, she has penetrated something that the bubonic plague couldn't do. She penetrated
the
royalty.
Castle itself, right?
Yeah.
So through this liberation, she has, been even more powerful than the plague at disrupting the establishment.
And there was also a point where, like, she had an orgy with everybody.
Yes.
And
which
then,
was awesome.
Yeah, and the devil came out, and everybody was fucking turning into some kind of crazy guru fuck snake.
Okay, my favorite thing about this movie is the portrayal of the devil, because he's literally a giant penis monster. Yeah. And, like, he keeps growing over the course of the movie and becoming more of a giant cock. And, like, literally, it's about embracing the devil dick. And I'm a big-time Satan guy. I'm kind of a devil guy. Devil man, maybe you might say. And when I see a really good Satan, I always have to give props.
Yeah, I agree.
The portrayal of Satan and Satanism in this movie is fun for me. So that was a big part of what I enjoyed about it. But, like, all my favorite scenes are the Satan scenes.
Yeah. So,
and the scenes of her just looking like a badass. Like, whenever she does have power, like when she's in the green fucking
the fashion
outfit.
in this movie is really cool.
Yeah.
Because it's all, like, 70s inspired textures, like checkered patterns, and, like, cool colors with, like, big shoulders. And it's just, like, really cool.
Yeah. Everything looks very aesthetically pleasing in this movie.
I don't know how much the 70s had to do with the situation, but, like, it does have to do with kind of, like, sexual liberation, that kind of idea. I think it was
basically just that this was the 70s, so they were just trying to make it modern,
It's just, it was a lot. It was a lot of 70s imagery, and it was kind of weird, but I did, like...
It's weirder now than it probably would have been then, Like, it's weird to look at it and go, like, okay, this movie is all 70s imagery, but it's set in the Middle Ages. This doesn't make sense, but, like, in the 70s, that just would have been what people looked like. It's just that the 70s was a time of really interesting aesthetics, but, like, that was just relatively normal for the time. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's I
don't know if it was relatively normal. It was like 70s, like, high fashion and like
the way people were portrayed in movies and stuff in the 70s.
Eventually, all the townspeople start to go on her side, and the king, like, pulls people aside and, like, has them hanged. Yeah. Like, he has a lady hanged for having sex with her husband not to have a child.
Right.
I assume it's, like, anal or, like, masturbation or something. And then there's an old lady that she gives, like, drugs to so she can cope with, like, her grandson dying. So he hangs those people, but, like, that doesn't work.
I didn't realize he had hanged them.
Yeah, there's a scene where, or maybe they burned them, but there's a scene that shows that, like,
I see. Yeah,
they have been gotten rid of.
He's trying to scare people out of being on her side. It's not working. But, like, in the end, like, because her husband comes to her, like, basically begging for her to make a deal with the king, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of unclear what she was hoping to accomplish, because, like, basically she just martyrs herself, and I don't know if it was that she somehow understood that would get her message out better, or if she just thought this was a losing battle. Like, maybe she was just convinced she would be killed if she didn't do something, I don't know why she decided to go with the husband to the king, But she
didn't
basically
want to work with the crown because she hates everything they stand for.
But like she could have just run away, right? Like couldn't she have just taken her people and left or fought back? Like why did she decide? Like she knew she was going to die if she went with him.
I think because she was reunited with Jean, like the part of her that still like held on to her former self was like, I can't like run away from him. I don't want to run away.
Could be. Maybe she just decided, I guess I'll just die, with him instead of against him or something. It's hard to say.
Not necessarily that he even was going to die because he's sold her out before.
Right. I mean, I just know that she knew she was going to die because she didn't go there with any intentions of negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, she even said, like, I don't want to make negotiations. I want the whole world. I want everybody to have revolution.
And so the king has her burned at the stake. The husband throws his life away because he's, he can't take it. And everybody who sees it, their face becomes her face. They're inspired, much as Jesus on the cross inspired the people. She on the cross also inspired them.
They also say, like, when they were going to burn her at the stake the first time, that they shouldn't do that if she has the devil's soul because it'll just spread.
Right. That's what happened. Right. I figured that was what they were trying to say at that point, was that, if you, which again, the devil in this movie is self-actualization. It is taking life into your own hands. So, like, if we burn her at the stake, what she symbolizes will inspire other people, and that's exactly what happens. And then, apparently, vis-a-vis women in the French Revolution. Yeah. Like, that's what the ending says, very literally. It's like, and then, in 1700s, when the French Revolution happened, women were on the battlefield. You can thank Jean. It was strange. Like, I don't know, because that spelling of Jean, or Jeanne, or whatever, is how Japanese people always spelled Joan of Arc. So I was wondering if she's supposed to be Joan of Arc.
The Japanese love Joan of Arc.
They do. They're fucking obsessed with her. And, like,
she's in, like,
this
tons
movie
of shows.
It was apparently based on a book, because it said that at the beginning. I don't know what the book is. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Probably like a weird...
I don't know if this is just a really fucking strange interpretation of Joan of Arc, or if they
I don't know.
But for whatever reason, this led to the French Revolution having women in it, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely meant to be a... See, here's where I'm torn on the movie. I like the imagery. I love the music. I love the tone of it. I like what it's trying to say ultimately about, taking matters into your own hands, seizing power, embracing the devil, going against the light of God. However, what disappoints me is, again, that we don't really understand how she did it. Like, okay, cool, seize power. How, though? Because it's not really clear how she does it.
With crazy fashion and the color green.
Yeah, she just starts wearing green and I guess showing her tits to people.
It's devil shit.
And like,
it's the devil.
I don't know if the best way to convey how a woman should seize power is through using her sexuality and her body. Like, no. I don't know if that's the best way to encourage that. It clearly is the best way she could do it for herself at the time, but that's not really something to be celebrated. That's the only way she can seize power. It's kind of depressing. Maybe that's intentional. I don't know. But, like, it's disappointing to see that there's no answer for you in this movie. It's meant to inspire you, but not necessarily to give you any fucking clear idea of how to go about doing anything. Not that most of these stories ever do, but just in a case like this where we don't even see any portrayal whatsoever of how she is seizing power. Like, it's just like, then she became a moneylender. Okay, how? How did she do that?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Aside from the ending bit, I guess, where she, leads people off and teaches them about self-pleasure, but... So is that how you seize power, is become a guru?
Yeah.
I mean...
Use the herb to cure the bubonic plague.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other parting thoughts on this movie?
I thought it was cool. I'm glad I saw it. A lot of really cool artistic techniques. It was pretty dank. However, it didn't really resonate with me. I thought it was too long. I didn't really care about,
What would you score it?
Gian. I would probably give it a 7 because it was a good time, but like I didn't, I thought it was kind of generic 70s drug.
Yeah.
Druggy.
I would give it an 8. I was surprised by how straightforward of a martyr narrative it ended up being. It did remind me a lot of Jesus Christ Superstar. It kind of reminded me of like Proto Men albums or like anything, just any story like this where Utena, and a lot of those are better. Like I would say I would take any of those over this movie, so I'm not going to give it like a super high score. But just the amount of fucking sick animation and cool music made me feel like this is a movie I could easily see myself watching again under the influence of drugs. Like, if I wanted to get really baked or take acid and watch an anime movie, this would be, like, high on the list. Especially for acid, because this is probably the most, like, acid... Like, of any movie I can think of, this is the one I would pick to watch on acid. So, that's a strong point. And I'm glad I wasn't the first time because it would have been terrifying. But I think rewatching it, knowing what's going to happen and being able to kind of, be prepared for it would make it possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only really context I could see myself rewatching it is on drugs. I don't think I'd just watch it standard again because, like you said, it's not an amazing story. Maybe I'd check out the Sakugo.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately, Midori just does it better for me.
Yeah.
But I recommend you check out both those movies.
I think I could more easily see myself watching this one again than Midori because Midori is kind of a fucking nightmare.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it goes all out with it, though.
Yeah. I definitely think Midori will, like, thematically sticks in my mind more than this movie. Because, again, like you said, it's fairly generic, this one. And Midori has a more unique message, especially
and I just
in that
really
it doesn't...
like that it's, like, kabuki, like, style.
Yeah.
Or not kabuki, but, like,
what's it called? That stuff. Go watch her video.
Go watch my video. I made it a year
Pantsu Party
ago.
channel. I'll put a link in the description to her Midori video. It's really good. I like it a lot.
But, the setting it takes place in has more meaning than in this movie, which is it's kind of disappointing.
That I would definitely agree about. I think Midori can I think I can call it a better movie in terms of just
but they're not the same movie.
merit.
We don't have to go comparing apples to oranges.
All right. That's it for us talking about the movies. Now let's open up this fucking mail to celebrate my completing 1,000 anime. And I will say I was very happy with Belladonna of Sadness being my 1,000. Like,
yeah, definitely.
I was looking at lots of classic movies I hadn't seen, but there was nothing that I think would have been a better pick.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh boy.
We got one of these. It definitely is a gift because we got the Amazon gift bag wrapping here. Let's see what this fucking paper says.
Whoa.
This is just what it is. Hi, Digibro and May. I wanted to send another school uniform just for May to have some variety. Enjoy. But going by what it was described as, you're not going to want to wear this.
What?
Oh, God.
I'm excited. I'm also terrified.
Oh, actually, it is just a... Okay.
Oh, it's really cute.
It's a cute school. It says on here... It says... Little for Big Adult Baby Onesie Diaper Lover Snap Crotch Romper Onesie Pajamas Magical Onesie Mint Green Set.
That's like the other one that I have.
It literally says ABDL on it.
Yeah,
it says Adult Baby Diaper Lovers. It's intended for adult baby diaper lovers.
This is fantastic. It's really cute. It's just like
they used a show card Gothic font on their
I have one of these,
iconography.
It's just like a school uniform with like a turquoise.
Okay, but does it have a baby diaper? Like,
no,
is there...
it's like a romper. It's like a romper.
But why?
But it does have the snap crotch. That's what.
Why is it specifically ABDL?
Because I think it has the snap crotch. I think that's what it is.
That's not abnormal. Oh, these are the people who make that I Heart Daddy shirt.
Yeah, no.
I've seen
It's
that.
very cute. Thank you very much. I loved the one that I had before, so I love this one. I love the colors.
I'm glad we opened this with you being there. It is really cute.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just put out of mind that the branding is ABDL, I guess. Anyway. This is also from Amazon. Let's see what we got.
Whoa.
This looks like a fucking trick.
Perfect for the theme.
Yeah, it's some kind of comics anthology that looks intense as fuck. It looks guru as hell. It's got a whole ton of different authors, I guess.
That is fucking lit.
Oh, this is the first page I opened to, and it looks awesome. This is cool. This is mad aesthetic shit. Yeah, it's just like a bunch of cool-ass fucking indie comics, I guess. I could not have asked for something better for this video. If you're into the movies we talked about, you would almost certainly be into this.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. Thank you to whoever sent this. Neither one of them had a sign-off on them. Neither one of them had a name. Just a couple of Amazon. Did the other one? Yeah, this one was sent by the outfit was V616 from V616. So thank you V616, and thank you to whoever sent this other thing. I don't think there's any. No, there's no note. Well, that's fucking cool shit. And this has been a fun celebration of completing 1,000 anime.
Now you gotta make a rap. Are
you satisfied? Are you satisfied with your performance in this video?
Yeah.
Are you okay with this being posted to the main channel?
I guess so. I still sound like a bumbling moron, but
we'll leave that up to the audience to decide. Let us know if you want more content like this. If you enjoyed this video, please. This woman will not do it if she doesn't get a lot of positive feedback.
That's not true.
So you have to butter her ego and convince her that this is necessary content, that you will be really upset if there's not an episode 2.
I just want to know that people are into this direction, because personally as a fan, I don't know if this would be what I'd want over other types of content.
Well, it's not over. There's nothing being replaced by this.
It's not replacing anything. It's just like a different way to kind of have discussions about movies, and this wouldn't exist without, a person to talk about it with.
Yeah. I definitely... these two movies were a lot of fun to talk about you with because we had such different perspectives on them. So that's why I tend to like to do movie commentaries, because, with a movie, there's just a different... there's just so much going into it.
You way more things to talk about than an episode of bad anime.
Right. All right, everybody. See you in the next one. Bye.
Miguel out.
Shit, we forgot to do our fucking plugs. Where can they find you?
You can find me at _I'm super cute on Twitter and at Pantsuit Party on YouTube.
And what are you doing on Twitter?
I post dank memes, and right now I'm doing a drawing every day for the month of June.
ArtHo June.
June.
ArtHo June.
Yes.
And I am on this channel, obviously, and you should become a patron, because if you pay $1, you get into my Discord, and if you pay $5, you get the 2 weeks review, where the two of us summarize what we did for the last 2 weeks and review all the things that we did that we don't talk about in other videos. And for $15, you get a rant, and for $40, you get a care pack, where we film what's going on in our everyday lives. The next one will probably have a bunch of footage from our trip to Oklahoma that we're taking in a week to go to your family reunion. So... look forward to that. And that's enough plugs, right?
Sure.